In this lesson, let's go ahead and store discussions into the database and display the results on the single discussions page. So to get started, we are going to go to the create.blade.php for discussions, and then I'm going to make sure that this method is post. And then the second thing I want to do is I want to implement the tricks editor right away for the contents. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to tricks editor, search for tricks editor. We've implemented this before, so I'm just going to hurry over it. And then I want to search for CDN, so that we're just going to get the CDN assets. Open up cdnjs.com, and then I'll copy the CSS value right there, and then come to my view. And then since I want this to only be available on this page, I'm going to create two sections, one called CSS and then end section, and I'm going to paste a link to this CSS file. And then I'm also going to have a section for scripts, so add section, maybe called JS, and section. So I'll copy the URL to the tricks.js, and then here I'm going to have script where the source is equal to this. And what we want to do is go to our app.blade.php, which is our layouts file, and yield CSS right here. And also we want to yield scripts right here. So yield scripts, or it's actually called JS. That's the name of the section right here. Okay, so if we come to this view, refresh and view the page source, you can see we have the tricks CSS right here, and we have the tricks JavaScript. Awesome. Now the next step is in the tricks documentation right here. So what we want to do is copy this, which is the input and the tricks editor directive, and then go into our form right here and replace with our text area like this. Okay, so the input name has to be content because this is what we'll be receiving on the backend, and then tricks editor will pass in the input as content, and that's all we need to do. Okay, so remember the name is content right here because we are sending that to the server, and to the tricks editor we pass input content. So if we refresh this page, you can see our tricks editor is active. But if you notice something, the toolbars are still not working, and that's because of the way Laravel by default loads the assets. Let me show you. In our app.blade.php right here, you can see that the script is loaded and deferred at the top, but this doesn't work well with most packages I've worked with. So what I always do is I always delete the defer, and then I always copy this script and put it where it belongs, which is down here. Okay, so if I refresh this page and check this out, it looks like it's working again. Awesome. So the tricks editor is back on track. All right, so now that we have our tricks editor for the content, so the user can specify, exactly what content they want, we are going to take care of this form on the backend. So we're going to come to our discussions controller, and then in our store method, we need to inject a custom request so that we have validation rules. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a request, and this is going to be create discussions request, or create discussion request since we're creating one. And I'll go to the create discussion request, and what I want to do is make sure that I pass some validation rules, like the title is required, and I also have the content required, and I also have the channel required. And what this is going to do is make sure that this value is valid, the data coming into the server is valid before we actually permit the transaction. Here I'm just going to add true, and what I could do for authorization is to make sure the user is authenticated, but that's authentication. So I'm going to add a middleware to my controller, and that's going to fix that. Okay, in this case we don't have any authorization issues. So I'm going to create a constructor, because remember we can validate using middleware from our routes file or from our constructor. So I'm going to say public function construct, and I'm just going to say this middleware auth, and I'm just going to say this should only be on the routes create and store, which means the other routes can be accessed by users who are not authenticated. Okay, and we're going to talk more about this because we want all users to be able to see a conversation whether they are logged in or not, right? So in the create, we just return this view, and in the store, what we're going to do is we're first of all going to inject the right request, so create discussion request, so that the validation rules kick in. Okay, so you can see it's auto used at the top for me. And then what we want to do is we want to say discussion, which is the model, and I'm going to use that, create, and we'll pass in the details of the discussion, like the title, which is going to be request title, and then the content, which is going to be request content, and the channel ID, and this is going to be request channel. But one more thing that is really important is the creator of this discussion, which means we can either pass the user ID right here so that we know the creator, or we can do something as elegant as this. We can do auth user create, and this is going to create a discussion for, we can do something like auth user, then we'll call a relationship called discussions create. Okay, and the discussions relationship is a relationship has many, so a user can have many discussions, but we don't yet have this discussion relationship. So we'll go to our user.php, scroll right down to the bottom and add it. So public function discussions, and we're going to say return this has many discussion class, like that, which means right now we can say auth user discussions create, and then we can return redirect, and we'll redirect to a route called discussion.index, and probably maybe we want to flash something to the session, so session flash, and this is going to be a success key that says discussion posted. Okay, now we can go to this endpoint for displaying all discussions and return a view called discussions.index, and we are going to return a list of discussions. So the second argument we can pass to the view function is the data we want to share with the view. Okay, so I'm showing you all the different alternatives so that when you see a new code base, you're going to know that, oh, this is what this is for. In this case, if you see a second argument into the view function, it means they're sharing data to the view. So in this case, we simply want discussion, and then we'll paginate and get 5 records at a time. So we want only 5 records per page for the discussions. Okay, so if we go to our discussions, we need to add the index.blade.php. So I'm just going to copy everything in my home and paste it right there. And what's going to happen is right here, we're going to have add discussion at the top, which is fine. And then we want to loop through each and every discussion and then have a card. So we're going to say for each discussions as discussion, then we're going to say and for each, and I'll just paste that right there. Awesome. So if we come to our application, maybe we should just change the title of this to, you know, something that is more suited for the discussion. So I'm going to say discussion title, and here I'm just going to say discussion content. And remember, since it's from the Tricks editor, it's going to come as HTML. So we want to change this to exclamation marks, like that. Okay, so let's try this out. First, I'm going to open up my Libsum website. So we have some lorem ipsum content. And then I'm going to come right here, copy this section, paste it right there in my Tricks editor, copy this as the title and paste it right there. select a category or channel, and then create discussion. And we have an error that says a field slug doesn't have a default value for the discussions table, which means we haven't provided the slug, right? Now, I'm going to show you a really cool way to do this, but for this lesson only, I'm going to come right here, and here I'm going to add the slug field. So I'm going to say slug is going to be string slug of request title. So if we come right now, refresh and submit this request again, we are redirected back to the page for viewing all discussions, and you can see we have the title right here and we have the discussion details right there. Awesome. Which means that we can see or view a list of all discussions. One thing we want to add is the pagination links, okay, so we don't forget. So right here we have a card. What we're going to add right here is discussions links, okay, so we don't forget. Now that we can see a list of all conversations, the next step is to be able to reply to those conversations and, suggest answers to the questions. In the next lesson, we're going to start taking care of this. Thank you so much and see you then.